Hello, today is my 46th birthday and I am bending and stretching and kicking. Okay, that's an SNL skit, kids. Okay, so why am I so fucking giddy today? Disclaimer, there will be curse words used during the telling of the story because I simply do not articulate my thoughts and feelings and ideas and emotions well enough to not use curse words. And I find curse words to be efficient and effective. They let you, the viewer, the listener, know that what I'm saying at that moment requires extra exclamation, that perhaps the information is pertinent to the story. And it's my idea that if I really want to be heard or listened to, and I want people to understand where I'm coming from, I want to use words that invoke emotions and things of that sort. And I think that when I use big ass words unnecessarily, I come off sounding pretentious, and I don't want to do that. Okay, so let me preface this story by saying that I think it's super important to have people in your life who genuinely want to see you smile. And it's such a thing to be appreciative of and grateful for if you have that. And I'm so thankful because I have people like that in my life. People who think if I do this to or with or for Shanita, she'll smile. And they do. And I hope that the relationship is reciprocal because I want to be that person in people's lives who make them smile and make them laugh. And right now I'm speaking about somebody in particular named Rachel. I met Rachel almost 20 years ago. We served together as Peace Corps volunteers in Kenya. Sister friend Rachel, miss you, love you, thank you, see you soon. And I'm not gonna lie, my birthday month started off kind of on a low point. I thought something was going to happen and then it didn't, and there was some sadness and there's anger and disappointment, mostly anger and disappointment, but trucking along. So I come home one day and I look on the porch and there's a package, and I'm thinking, what the fuck did I order from Amazon? Turns out I did not order a single thing from Amazon. Instead, I got this. Little drums. Oh my goddess. And I bet you're like, Sheena, what the hell is this? If you give me a few moments of your time, I'll explain to you exactly what this is. First of all, if you didn't know, I am a huge fan of J R R Tolkien, and that is the author of including but not limited to The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, The Silmarillion, The Unfinished Tales of Middle Earth, Tom Bombadil, whatever he did, like, I'm into it. And this particular backpack is depicting, this life bag is depicting a picture of the doors of Durin. I'll tell you about that if you give me a moment, because I want to tell you a story. And if you turn it around, you've got, the Fellowship, Gandalf, Legolas, and hobbits, and Aragorn, Boromir, and Gimli, and all of those people, whatever. And I was seriously contemplating whether or not I wanted to buy this bag, because I'm thinking, do I really want to be a 46-year-old woman spending her hard-earned money on little trinkets like that? And then I thought, bitch, get real. You walk around your house with elf ears on and a cape, eating Oreos and drinking milk when nobody's watching. Get over yourself. I'm going to regret sharing that with you, but whatever. And so turns out I didn't have to buy the bag because Rachel sent it to me. I'm so happy I got that bag, you have no idea. Okay, so Doors of Durin. I'm not asking for a tangible birthday gift from you, although I would not say no. Instead, I'm asking of you something that's a little bit more precious. That's your time, because I want to tell you a story about Middle Earth and these doors, the Doors of Durin, okay? Do I have your attention? All right. So if you've ever seen the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship. Oh my God! Listen, once my eyebrows grow back in, I'm going to be a menace. Okay, straight menace. All right. So if you've ever seen Fellowship, Lord of the Rings, Part 1, there's a scene where Gandalf and the company, they're trying to get inside of a mine. They're on a journey to destroy the One Ring, and they're standing in front of these doors, and Gandalf can't remember the secret password to get into the doors. Those doors are called the Doors of Durin, Doors of Moria, the Westgate entrance, and they're significant and special because those doors were created during an unprecedented time between dwarves and elves where they were actual friends. I mean, hardcore parkour friends, you know, hanging out, kicking it, you know, no violence, no animosity, because traditionally and historically, dwarves and elves hate each other. I mean, outright aggression. It's so bad, the hate between dwarves and elves, that by the time you and I get to the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, there's a race of dwarves that don't even exist anymore. They don't even exist anymore. Elves slaughtered them into extinction, killed them off. They were called the petty dwarves, and they were considered to be a diminutive race in regards to dwarfs. And when I talk about great dwarfs or petty dwarfs, when I speak about great dwarfs, I'm speaking about the dwarfs that you and I see by the time we get to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And so petty dwarfs were shorter in stature, maybe you could say less cultured, less skilled, less advanced. I don't know. But yeah, and the elves usually only saw them at nighttime because that's when the dwarves would come in and like raid their camps and whatnot. And because the dwarves, you know, their skill level just didn't match that of the elves, they were pretty much wiped out. And it wasn't until the elves met the great dwarfs that they were like, oh shit, this is y'all? We didn't know. The elves did not see the petty dwarfs as being incarnate beings, like actual people. They thought they were just two-legged beasts. Now the great dwarfs, they didn't really like the petty dwarfs either, but they were still like, you know, we didn't really like them, and we didn't fuck with them like that, but you still shouldn't have done it. So, and what did the dwarfs do to the elves? I mean, there was you know, pillaging and killing from their side as well. There's a few dwarves who fought on the dark side. The dwarves actually killed one of their great kings, King Thingol. King Thingol was an old king, but remember, elves are immortal. But he was an old king. He had been kicking and thriving long before the dwarfs even came into existence. King Thingol is so old. He was around before the moon and the sun were made. Highly regarded king. And they slew him in his own home over a necklace called the Nauglamir. The Nauglamir, exquisite piece of jewelry, by the way, had a more even precious jewel set upon it called a silmaril. That's an important word I want you to remember, silmaril. And they slew him. And the history between dwarves and elves hating each other lasts for thousands of years. By the time that you and I get to the events of The Lord of the Rings, those dwarves were already thousands of years old. If you remember, they're still funking by the time we get to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. There's a scene in Lord of the Rings, and they're at the Council of Elrond, and they're trying to decide what to do with this one ring. They have it in their possession. And Lord Elrond says, you know, this ring's gotta go. Who's going to take it on a journey and cast it back into the fiery chasm from whence it came? And there's dissension because there's some people who are like, do we really want to destroy this ring? Can't we use this ring to help us defeat the enemy? Let's not be hasty. And Legolas the elf says, didn't you guys hear a damn thing Lord Elrond even said? The ring has to be destroyed. There's no other alternative. And Gimli the dwarf is there, and he agrees. He thinks the ring should be destroyed as well. He just doesn't trust that motherfucker to do it. And he says, and I suppose you're the elf to do it. I'll be dead before I see the ring in the hands of an elf. Never trust an elf. And like, you're thinking, Geez, Gimli, calm down. Legolas seems pretty capable and a trustworthy dude. What is your problem? You have to remember that Gimli's father, Gloin, was imprisoned by Legolas's father, Thranduil, in The Hobbit for over a month. Just held him captive. So Gimli has an axe to grind. Okay, that was a joke. I'll see myself out. So what I'm telling you is that there's a long history, and one could even say that they were destined and fated to hate each other. So back to the Doors of Durin. The Doors of Durin were created by an elf lord named Lord Celebrimbor and a dwarf named Narvi. I'm going to give you some backstory on the characters because these characters are really too epic to not share some information with you, and I'm trying to keep the story cohesive and linear as possible. So to Lord Celebrimbor. Lord Celebrimbor, during his time, was said to be the greatest craftsman of elf, dwarf, and king to have ever lived, save for his grandfather Fëanor, who created the Silmarils. Lord Celebrimbor wanted to be better than his grandfather. His grandfather Fëanor was said to be the greatest elf to have ever elfed. Greatest in mind, body, and spirit, in craft, in strength and courage. It just so happens he was a massive asshole. Caused a lot of havoc over these jewels called the Silmarils. There's a whole book called The Silmarillion, and it's a whole story about pre-Silmarils and after Silmarils. The creation of these jewels from Fëanor created death and destruction for thousands of years. I think even after he died. And so Lord Celebrimbor wants to be better than his grandfather in skill, and he wants redemption from his family. Put it this way, Fëanor produced and directed Thriller, okay, the Thriller video. And Lord Celebrimbor wants to create a video that's more iconic and more culturally impactful than Thriller. The problem is Lord Celebrimbor can't do it by himself. He doesn't have the skill for it. He doesn't have the craft. He's just not as great as his grandfather. Lord Celebrimbor belongs to a group of elf craftsmen who call themselves the Gwaihir Aimyrdain. I have no idea if I said that word correctly, so I'm not going to repeat it. So him and his band of elves, they just basically create stuff all day, and they just can't seem to just create something better, than the Silmarils. So along comes the Dark Lord Sauron, but he's not coming as the Dark Lord Sauron. He's in disguise, and he's saying that he's a friend of elves, and he just, wants to share some information that he has. So he goes around different, areas and elf kingdoms or whatever, peddling this idea that I have this magic that I can teach you, and with this magic, you can create the greatest rings ever, the most powerful rings ever. So he peddles that around. All of the elves say no thank you. We're talking Lady Galadriel, we're talking Lord Elrond, we're talking at the time the king of elves, King Gilgalad, and they all say no. And they send a message to Lord Celebrimbor. We don't know who this guy is, but he's going to come to you and with some idea, and we're just warning you to not trust him. Lord Celebrimbor receives this information, but he's like, I understand where you're coming from, but I'm gonna still fuck with him because he has information that I need. And so the Dark Lord Sauron, disguised as a friend of the elves, teaches Lord Celebrimbor and his group of elves this craft, how to imbue magic into rings and make very powerful rings. And so Lord Celebrimbor makes the 19 Rings of Power. There's a whole series on Amazon called The Rings of Power, and they're about Lord Celebrimbor and the creation of the Rings of Power. You should watch it. Or, okay, no, maybe not, because I don't even understand what's really going on. Okay, so he makes the Rings of Power, and when I'm speaking about the Rings of Power, I'm not talking about the one ring from the Dark Lord Sauron. I'm talking about the 7 rings made for the dwarfs. Those rings eventually went on to be destroyed by dragons, eaten by dragons, and I think Lord Sauron got his hands on them. I'm speaking about the 9 Rings of Power, the 9 rings gifted to the race of men who above all else desire power. And the 3 rings, the mightiest of those 19, the 3 elf rings that Lord Celebrimbor made by himself without the help of the other elves and Lord Sauron. And those are the rings that we see that Lady Galadriel, Lord Elrond, and Gandalf are in possession of when we get to the events of the Lord of the Rings. So so that's Lord Celebrimbor. That's his handiwork. That's his skill. You know, that's his craft. I'm not going to explain to you what happened after the Dark Lord Sauron found out that he had been betrayed by Lord Celebrimbor. Just know that it was sick. It was twisted. It was evil. It was depraved. And you should read about it in the Silmarillion so that we can discuss it. So that's Lord Celebrimbor. Now, when we come to the dwarf Narvi, who assisted or, you know, co-built the wall, the dwarf Narvi, lucky for you, I don't know much about the dwarf Narvi, nor does anybody else really. We do know that he was considered to be one of the great craftsmen of his kind as well during the time. The dwarf Narvi hailed from the greatest dwarf kingdom ever, Khazad-dûm, and he belonged to a group of dwarfs that we referred to as the Longbeards. Now, the dwarf Narvi's skill and craft and forging was so exquisite that he made those doors, those walls, out of a material stronger than stone. And though the doors were so flushed against the mountain that you couldn't tell that there were doors there. You couldn't see the latches, you couldn't see the hinges, you couldn't see the door knobs, you couldn't see anything. The only time that you could actually see the door would be at nighttime. And that would be only because there's starlight or moonlight shining down upon it. Because Lord Celebrimbor imbued the writings, the runes over the walls, with a material, with an alloy called Ithaniel. Oh my God, somebody's gonna correct me on that one. And you can make that alloy from an element called mithril. You've seen mithril. It's the coat that Bilbo and Frodo have in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. It's the shiny, you know, chainmail. Mithril. Very strong material. Can be used in magic if you know how to manipulate it. When I say mithril, think of vibranium, think of adamantium, that stuff that Wolverine's bones are covered in. It's a very important element in Middle Earth. So so that's what the runes are imbued with, and they light up when starlight or moonlight shines down on them. Now remember, you can't get through the doors unless you have the magic word to get through the doors. Now, this is during a time where, as I said, the dwarves and elves were getting along and they were having lunch and dinner with each other and hanging out, and it wasn't so gang. And okay, I'm not sure if I used that term correctly. So moving forward, I'm going to stick to age-appropriate slang terms. But you get my meaning. It was cool. So the password to get in is not that difficult. The password to get the doors to open is to say friend in Elvish. And how do you say friend in Elvish? Melon. That, and doors open wide, and voila. I'm trying to think. So yeah, that's the history of the doors of Durin. They were forged and created during a time where a miracle happened, where dwarves and elves weren't killing and murdering and betraying each other. So I want to show you that this little thing lights up when I do like this. Melon. Oh my God, this is melon. Melon. See that? Oh my God. Listen, I'm gonna take this bag outside, even though I'm super afraid that something's gonna happen to it, but I feel like it should be on display. FYI, if you see me on the street, you can, in time permitting, feel free to speak to me about all things J R R Tolkien. In addition to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV series. Not the movie. I won't say no, but I prefer the TV series because when I think of Buffy Summers, I think of Christy Swanson. I mean, I don't think of Christy Swanson. I think of Sarah Michelle Gellar. As Buffy. And you can probably talk to me about Alanis Morissette's first album, Jagged Little Pill. I wouldn't say no to that. So I'm hoping that you enjoyed this little story about the doors of Durin, the doors of Moria, and you learned a little bit about dwarfs and elves, I hope that it piqued your interest and that you'll want to maybe download the books in audio form and listen to them. And maybe the stories in the world that J R R Tolkien created will arrest your spirit, and you'll want to learn more, and you'll go further, and you'll discover that every year there's a Hobbit convention in New Zealand. And maybe you'll think, I want to organize a group. Who will go? I will go. I'll go. Or maybe New Zealand is just too far and is just doing too much, and maybe you'll discover there's all kinds of little festivals and things that celebrate Middle Earth, and you'll think, who will dress up with me? I will. I'll dress up with you. I have the materials already. I'm prepared. So, thank you for your time. Be that person in people's lives who make them smile, if you're able. And I hope that you have that in your life too. And I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting some. I'm so concerned about whether or not I'm going to forget information about that story, because I really want you to become interested in it with me. I'm going to put some links at the bottom of this that will give you shortcuts to learning the characters and what happened, and you won't have to be a loser like me and a lot of us who just had to read the books and figure out stuff on our own because we didn't have little chat rooms and groups to discuss the stories with. And yes, thank you for coming to my story time. If you want to hear more stories about Middle Earth, I might be open to that. I don't have any visuals to accompany this story with. I'll put some slides in just so you can, help you visualize it. Thank you. Appreciate it.